Before we start, just a quick reminder to hit that subscribe button. Only 2% are subscribed at 1,000 subscribers. I'll be posting a special video. He flicked a folder open and pressed a pen into my palm. I kept my hand still and let the pen sit. His jaw twitched like a warning light. I looked at the signature line and felt my pulse climb. If I sign now, I disappeared. I'm Mara, 31, and I refuse to vanish. He tapped the date line twice and waited. My name already sat there in neat print. My throat went dry and stubborn. He watched me stall like a referee waiting for a fall. Sign it, he leaned over the table. I slid the folder back an inch. He followed the movement and blocked it with his wrist. His voice dropped to a controlled whisper. I heard a crack under that calm. What changed? I kept my eyes on his mouth. He didn't blink and didn't answer. The air felt heavy with unsaid rules. He forced a smile that didn't reach anything. I smelled trouble in that pose. You chose strangers over us. He drummed the table once. I remembered last night's laughter hanging in our hallway. He flinched when he mentioned it. I saw restraint fray like an old rope. I pushed the pen to the middle of the folder. He reached for it fast, then stopped. His phone vibrated against the wood. He ignored it for a beat, then flipped it face down with care. That tiny caution rang louder than a shout. We're broken, he kept his tone even. I counted my breaths and skipped none. We can fix what's actually cracked. My voice stayed low and clipped. His jaw worked harder like he chewed a nail. He nudged the folder closer again. I let it touch my elbow and held. You want peace, I get it. I tapped the table, one tap, then two. Peace is not abandonment dressed as logic. His eyes sharpened at that word. The phone buzzed again and again. He pretended not to hear it. I stared until he noticed my stare. He moved it to his pocket like it burned. I felt a crease appear in this moment. Cancel Friday, he didn't ask. I shook my head once. They are expecting me. My voice stayed steady and flat, his lips thin like a closing door. You love the spotlight. He tried to sound amused. I kept my face calm and open. I love people, not spotlights. I felt a flick of heat behind my ribs. He looked at my hands like they were guilty. I stood and the chair scraped hard. He stood with me almost instantly. For a second we mirrored each other, two statues daring the other to move first. That second lasted too long to feel safe. Therapy today? I held the words like a card I would play. His eyelids fluttered, then he masked it. You can sit in or wait outside. I didn't blink when I offered the choice. He hated choices that boxed him in. He lifted the folder and squared the edges. Sign after work. His voice aimed for final. I rested my palm on the table and leaned in. Not today, not like this. Space tightened between us like a knot. He pocketed the pen and grabbed his keys. I stepped sideways and blocked the path. One answer before you go. My heartbeat felt loud but disciplined. Is someone coaching you from the shadows? His stare went blank like a shutter falling. He brushed past me and reached the door. I stepped aside, then followed. His shoulders tightened at the hallway turn. Who's texting you like a boss? I wanted the name now, not later. No one important. He kept walking and quickened the pace. I matched him and watched his knuckles white. Then unlock your phone and prove it. My voice stayed even but braced for impact. He stopped near the elevator and stared at the floor. The phone stayed in his pocket like contraband. Trust me, he tried to sound casual and failed. Trust follows light, not closed fists. The elevator chimed like a dare. He slipped inside and hit ground level. I stepped in before the doors closed. He faced forward and controlled his breathing. We have therapy at 4. His jaw flexed once like a warning drum. The doors opened and he strode outside. I walked beside him and kept pace. I'll meet you there, he muttered without eye contact. You'll walk in with me, I answered without blinking. He didn't refuse, which meant he might run. He crossed the street on a stale signal. A horn blasted and he flinched hard. I grabbed his sleeve and pulled him back. He shook me off and looked furious. Fear hit me first, then anger answered. He headed toward the parking lot in silence. Let me drive if you're rattled. He ignored me and clicked unlock anyway. You're not fine, your tells are loud. He paused, then threw me the keys. I slid into the driver's seat and waited. He climbed in and turned his face away. I started the engine and checked the clock. 2 hours to kill before therapy. He didn't comment, which told me plenty. I'm hosting Friday, I said it like a steak. He laughed without humor and stared ahead. They already confirmed and prepped dishes. His mouth tightened like a sealed envelope. Control slipped through his hands and cut. He pulled out his phone and typed quickly. I kept my eyes on the exit ramp. Who gets that message? I asked softly and wait. D work, he tucked the phone away too fast. I changed lanes and signaled early. Work messages don't tremble your fingers. He looked at my hands on the wheel. You turn everything into court. He almost smiled and then lost it. A crack flashed and vanished. I parked outside the therapist's building and turned off the engine. We still had time, heavy and useful. Let's sit on the bench and breathe. He opened the door and chose the sidewalk instead. Distance bloomed where breath should have been. I followed and kept 3 steps behind. You want out because I talked to people. He didn't bite and kept moving, or because someone told you I'm a liability. He slowed but did not answer that. A cyclist zipped by and forced us apart. He used the gap like a curtain. I closed it and stood in front of him. If there's a group whispering in your ear, I'll drag them into daylight. He looked past me like a locked window. He finally met my eyes and lowered his voice. I need quiet nights and less spectacle. My ribs tightened at that old tune. Boundaries are negotiable, contempt is not. His mouth twitched and steadied. Friday stays on the calendar. I kept my tone flat. Join us and try the new plan. He rubbed his temple and looked nauseous. I saw dread, not just irritation. He pulled his phone again and typed a code. I reached out my hand without speaking. He hesitated, then placed the device in my palm. Notifications stacked like dominoes waiting to fall. I held my breath and tapped the top one. A message preview flashed from a private channel. The handle wore numbers and a crown emoji. Detached from her orbit tonight. The words punched harder than I expected. My skin went cold and awake. I showed the screen and watched his face. He reached to take it back and stopped. They call me a project, he muttered thinly. I kept the phone and scrolled further. The thread throbbed with orders masquerading as wisdom. Who are they? I kept my voice low and clipped. He shifted his weight and stared at the curb. Men who rebuild structure, he finally offered. I watched his throat move twice in lock. Rebuild implies demolition first. I turned the phone off and returned it. If they want us dismantled, say it out loud. He folded his arms and looked smaller for a second. That second mattered more than any speech. I set a timer for the session and rested my hands. We walk in together. He nodded once, then looked away quickly. If you bolt, I track you down. I smiled without softness so he knew I meant it. Fear can be useful when truth needs muscle. He exhaled like he'd been holding air for days. I'm tired of performing extroversion. He watched for a reaction and found none. I'm tired of ducking your rehearsed disappearances. That landed between us like a drawn line. A drizzle started and pushed us toward the door. He reached for the handle, then paused. I won't sign anything today. He studied my face for a trap. I let the silence hang until it shook. We stepped inside and checked in with a nod. The lobby clock ticked louder than my thoughts. He sat on the edge of the chair and stared at his shoes. I sat upright and anchored my feet. This felt like the moment before a siren. He turned his head and spoke quietly. If she asks about this channel, I'll deny it. I swallowed and met the challenge head on. I'll bring screenshots next time if needed. He blinked slowly like a man counting exits. Our names were called and the door opened wide. I stood first and waited for him to follow. He rose after a beat and kept his gaze down. We crossed the threshold like two smugglers with different cargo. Something heavy stayed outside and kept knocking. The door shut behind us and she gestured to the chairs. I sat first and angled toward him. He stayed near the edge like he might spring, my heels planted hard as if bracing for weather. Ground rules, her tone was even and direct. One person talks, the other listens. I nodded once and kept my gaze steady. He set his jaw and waited for permission that never came. I was handed divorce papers this morning. I kept my voice plain. They arrived with silence and marching orders. His shoulders rose as if expecting impact. The therapist's pen hovered and then rested. He spoke without looking at me. We thrive apart and shrink together. He rubbed his thumb across his palm. I need distance from her crowd. The word distance hung like a locked gate. I took the phone from my pocket and tapped. The screen lit with the private thread. I slid it across the table and watched him freeze. Someone told you to detach tonight, I said to the space between us. The therapist leaned forward and read quickly. Who writes these directives? Her eyebrow lifted like a small flag. He shifted and cleared his throat. His foot jittered under the chair and betrayed him. A mentor with strong views. He scratched his wrist and breathed out. He believes commitment demands hierarchy. I felt my pulse slow. To a deliberate beat, the therapist wrote 2 words and waited. Hierarchy over what? Her tone stayed neutral but sharper. He paused long enough to count. Over interference from outside forces. His eyes flicked toward me like I was a storm. I am not an outside force in my own marriage. My hands stayed flat on my knees. Your mentor talks like he owns our outcomes. The therapist glanced between us and anchored the room. She turned to him again. Are you paying this mentor? He hesitated and bit his lip once. Only for materials, he answered too fast. Heat climbed my neck, but I kept still. Show your banking app, I said without blinking. He stared at the table as if it might speak. Transparency starts now, the therapist added calmly. He pulled his phone out with stiff fingers. He entered a code and handed it over. I scrolled without commenting and kept my face unreadable. Charges lined up to a retreat center, 3 in the last month, each marked priority. Those are courses, he whispered and swallowed. Courses that told you to leave me, I answered. The therapist held up her palm for air. Name the instructor, she requested, voice crisp. He finally said the name and looked smaller. I typed it into a new search bar. The first result blasted claims about liberation through severing ties. My skin prickled and my jaw clenched hard. Do they ask you to limit social contact? The therapist kept the pressure steady. He nodded once and studied the carpet, only until equilibrium returns. He sounded like he had memorized it. Equilibrium for who? I asked and waited. He closed his eyes like counting to 10. For the masculine frame, he breathed out carefully. My heart thumped once like a gavel. She leaned back and assessed the room. We need clear requests that do not erase anyone. She turned to him and lifted her pen again. Give one concrete change you want. He looked at me and finally spoke. No large gatherings for 30 days. He watched my face as if expecting a flinch. 2 nights a week, just us, he added quickly. That second clause sounded like his own voice. I can trial that with conditions. I held his gaze and did not soften. You renounce this mentor and block that channel. The therapist nodded and underlined something twice. His breathing hitched like a gear slipping. He will reach out if I vanish. He rubbed his temple and stared at the door. Then I will answer for myself, I countered, pulse steady. Call him now, the therapist said with calm force. Put the phone on the table. He froze, then unlocked the screen again. The number hovered and waited like a dare. He tapped the call and set it down. The speaker clicked and a smooth voice filled the room. Brother, did you assert distance? The therapist moved her notepad aside like setting a boundary. We are in counseling, I answered before he could. This relationship will not be triangulated. The voice chuckled and shifted to condescension. She is performing control in public. I forced my throat to stay open. We are choosing our own terms today. I kept each word clean and measured. Do not contact him again. The line went silent for a breath and then sneered. You lack respect for order. The speaker dragged the word like a chain. I leaned toward the phone with both palms visible. Your order ends here, I said, voice like stone. The therapist reached and disconnected the call. He stared at the black screen and blinked rapidly. His hands shook and then went still. I did not expect you to answer him. A different emotion cracked through, bright and raw. The therapist spoke again and cut through the moment. You choose between a program and your partner today. She waited and did not rescue the silence. He swallowed and nodded once like an oath. I will leave the channel now. He navigated and hit delete with a firm thumb. I watched the icon vanish and kept breathing slow, relief mixed with suspicion like oil and water. Next step is restitution, I said evenly. Issue a message to our Friday guests. He looked startled and then wary of the trap. What message? He asked, almost gentle. You will attend and respect the pace. I leaned forward and refused to blink. If you feel overwhelmed, you step out and return. The therapist smiled slightly as if seeing a bridge. He glanced at the clock and cleared his throat. I can try the dinner with boundaries. He drew a breath that reached his ribs. No alcohol for me that night. That unscripted concession felt real. Financial repair next, the therapist added. Share access and remove secrecy. He nodded and opened the settings menu. A new alert popped up offering shared control and history. I took the phone and completed the link. Transactions unfurled like a ledger refusing shame. I did not comment, I only saved the record. Proof secures memory when fear edits the past. He covered his face for a second. I hate that I hid it. The words came rough and reluctant, I believed. That small sentence more than the rest. He lowered his hands and looked 10 pounds lighter. We will draft a plan you can both live with. The therapist handed us a page with short lines. Write 3 promises each, keep them measurable. I wrote fast and felt resolve harden. My list set non-negotiables with clean edges. Respect in public, no secret advisors, shared money logs. His list included quiet hours and opt-outs. The overlap formed a workable core with teeth. We read them out loud and did not rush. The therapist signed as witness for clarity. You will revisit in 1 week, she concluded gently. He exhaled and nodded as if landing. We stood to leave and gathered our things. He opened the door and waited for me to pass. Thank you for handling the call, he murmured. I gave a small nod but kept my guard up. Outside, his phone buzzed 3 times in quick succession. A new number tried to pull him back. He hovered over it and then rejected them all. For the first time that day, his hand stayed steady. A thud hit our door before sunrise. I went straight to the peephole and saw no one. Another thud, lower this time like a warning. I unlatched the chain and opened an inch. An envelope slid across the threshold and stopped. Footsteps retreated down the stairs fast. I crouched and picked it up with 2 fingers. My skin prickled before I read a word. Inside sat a printed creed with bullet rules. Obey hierarchy, starve attention, exit shared spaces. At the bottom, a meetup time glared, tonight during my dinner. He entered the hall rubbing his eyes. I handed him the paper without a word. He read quietly and let out a hard breath. They know our plan, I said, voice iron. He folded the page once and looked torn. I didn't tell them about tonight. His hands hovered like he might hide them. Someone tracked us through a contact list. Forward every connected name to me. I pulled out my phone and opened notes. He started typing and shared 7 numbers quickly. 1 entry carried the same crown symbol from earlier. I called the first number on speaker. A robotic message bragged about rebuilding men. I ended it and flagged the call. They are not leaving you alone, I said, jaw tight. Block them again, he nodded and followed through. Each number vanished from his screen one by one. The last deletion trembled, then landed clean. Breakfast later, I said and grabbed my tote. We have errands for tonight. He reached for his wallet and paused midair. I will come with you. We moved through the market with a list. He steered the cart but kept scanning exits. 2 hours here then home, I set the pace. He agreed and kept his eyes clear. Halfway through, a stranger bumped his shoulder hard. Brother, you missed last night, the stranger smirked. My spine fired and I stepped between them. He is busy, I answered, crisp and final. The stranger's gaze slid over me like I was noise. You do not speak for him. My palms flared hot but I didn't blink. He speaks for himself, I said and waited. He lifted his chin and measured the man. I am not available. Each word struck like a hammer. The stranger sneered and tapped his own chest twice. This ends badly for you. Leave, I said and pointed to the exit. He laughed and took one step closer. I held my ground and smiled like a blade. A manager approached and asked for space. The stranger backed off while throwing a thumb across his throat. He mouthed a time that matched the notice. 8 o'clock, a direct collision. I felt the clock start ticking. Back home, I texted our guests. We begin an hour earlier. Quick replies rolled in with thumbs up. I set a quiet rule and kept it brief. No debates at the table. He unpacked groceries and kept glancing at the door. I pressed a palm to his back and grounded him. If they show up, I will handle it. He nodded but checked his phone anyway. An email pinged my inbox with a new subject. Legal language threatened consequences for defamation. The signature belonged to a consultant with a podcast. I forwarded it to our therapist for record. Do we cancel? He asked without looking up. We doubled down, I answered and sharpened my tone, but we control entry and the flow. He exhaled and squared his shoulders. Afternoon stretched and nerves crowded the rooms. I rehearsed my opening for the gathering. Gratitude first, then boundaries, then laughter aloud. My pulse found a steady drum. He stood by the window and counted cars. I hate that I am afraid. His voice shook and then steadied. Fear means you care about the outcome, I replied. Guests arrived carrying dishes and easy jokes. I greeted each person and set a simple rule, phones on silent. If you need air, step out and return. Heads nodded, eyes focused. He joined the circle and kept his posture tall. I watched him check his breathing like a pilot. Thank you for coming, I started, voice clear and warm. The room calmed like a held note. I kept introductions tight and moved to TH. E-plan, share stories, keep things kind, no side agendas. Everyone agreed and leaned in. Relief flickered across his face and held. Halfway through, a knock landed sharp and impatient. Conversations froze mid-sentence and eyes turned. I lifted my hand for quiet and walked to the entry. He followed 2 steps behind me. I opened to find 2 men in matching jackets. Their smiles looked practiced and confident. We're here for an intervention, the taller one announced. My eyebrows lifted like a drawbridge. This is a private night, I answered and kept my tone neutral. Leave now and do not return. The shorter one flashed a pamphlet and smirked. He tried to step forward and met my palm. Behind me, chairs scraped and friends stood. The taller man scanned the room and raised his voice. He belongs to our cohort, not this circus. Heat surged up my throat. He belongs to himself, I said and planted my feet. He is staying. Every syllable landed like a stamp. The shorter one laughed and pressed the door with his shoulder. I braced and did not budge an inch. Call security, someone whispered behind me. I didn't move, I simply stared through him. Power sometimes is refusal to flinch. He appeared at my side and lifted his chin. I rescind membership, he announced without a stutter. Take me off your lists. The taller man faltered for the first time. You cannot walk out on structure, the shorter one barked. He stepped back like preparing a scene. I reached for my phone and started recording. You are trespassing, I said, voice clean. They noticed the camera and wavered. The taller man pointed and growled about legal trouble. I kept filming and repeated the warning. Leave or we call the police. A neighbor's door opened across the hall. The 2 men glanced over and recalculated. We will be back, the shorter one muttered. They turned and retreated down the stairs. I closed the door and locked it fast. Silence held for a beat of disbelief. Then the room released a long breath. I looked at him and saw something unclench. He faced our friends and spoke with care. I am embarrassed. His voice was steady now, but I choose this room. Applause rose and then faded quickly. I lifted my glass and kept it short. Tonight remains ours. I looked around and set a promising rhythm. We go on at our pace. Heads nodded and conversation resumed cautiously. I checked the hallway through the peephole again. Empty, quiet, waiting. I slid a small wedge under the door, insurance against more theater. My phone buzzed with a final text. Unknown number, new threat, same tone, you will regret defiance. I saved the screenshot and filed it away. He caught my eye and touched his chest once. No words, just that vow. I returned the gesture with 2 fingers, for now the line held tight. I woke to a ringtone looping like an alarm, unknown number, crisp voice, fake concern. We received a tip about domestic instability. My eyes snapped open and I sat up. Someone had triggered a welfare check to rattle us. 2 officers arrived with clipped questions and calm faces. I answered clearly and kept my hands visible. He stood beside me and matched that steadiness. They looked around for danger and found none. They left with a warning about prank reports. I shut the door and locked it twice. He leaned against the wall and closed his eyes. "They're escalating," I said, pulse steady but hot. He nodded once like a man counting costs. Fear moved through the room and refused to hide. My phone vibrated again with a new alert. A forum thread used his initials and my photo. The caption accused me of manipulation for social clout. Comments piled up with borrowed phrases and fake certainty. I took screenshots and built a folder. "Do not read that," I told him and turned the screen. He stared anyway and winced like it burned. "We answer with records, not outrage." I opened a blank document and started a timeline. Receipts speak when slander shouts. A banking notification flashed red on his device. "Card declined," he muttered and checked the app. 3 withdrawals hit a minute apart. Same payee, different alias, one mailbox address. My stomach clenched and then found steel. "Get dressed," I said and grabbed my bag. We drove straight to the branch and asked for a freeze. I laid the printouts from therapy in front of the manager. "These charges are unauthorized after a membership termination." Her eyebrows lifted and then she went to work. She returned with a print slip and a nod. "We reversed and flagged the merchant," she said quietly. "A pattern like this often touches more accounts." She recommended a fraud case number and handed us a form. I signed and felt my hands stop shaking. Outside, his phone rang from an unfamiliar contact. He let it go to voicemail and listened on speaker. The message offered arbitration at a rental office tonight. I could hear chairs scraping in the background. They were already waiting for a fight. "No private meetings," I said and deleted the invitation. "All future exchanges happen on paper." He exhaled and unclenched his jaw. "I keep wanting to fix it face to face." I shook my head and kept walking. Back home, a neighbor flagged me down near the mailboxes. "A man left flyers on your floor," she whispered. She handed me one copy with my name half spelled. A QR code promised the truth. I scanned with a burner account and watched a slideshow smear my life. "Kill the link." I filed a takedown request and marked each violation. Then I sent the compilation to our therapist and a lawyer friend from college. I added subject lines with dates and short notes. Firewalls build quickly when every hour matters. At noon, I texted our guests from last night. "If strangers contact you, please forward details." Replies landed with screenshots within minutes. A few had received voicemails urging them to withdraw support. We archived every file like evidence in a safe. He brewed tea he never drinks and stared at the steam. "I'm embarrassed that I dragged you into this." He held the mug like an anchor and didn't sip. "You didn't drag me," I answered, voice low, "but you will help pull us out." He opened his laptop and started typing, a public statement short and clean. "I rescind involvement with any group that targets my partner." He read it aloud and waited for my face. "Add restitution and boundaries," I said, and he did. We posted the statement and watched the first comments roll in. Some cheered, some mocked, some aimed to lure him back. "Stay off replies," I said and closed the tab. He nodded and set the laptop aside like a hot plate. A calendar alert popped for our follow-up session. I texted a summary and flagged urgent developments. The therapist responded with one line: "No direct contact with instigators." We both stared at that line until it stuck. I dialed the number of the rental office from the voicemail. A receptionist picked up with a clipped greeting. "We do not host events by that name," she said quickly. I asked her to check the room schedule for 8. "Reserved for a men's wellness circle," she finally admitted. "Please note that my spouse will not attend," I said evenly. "We are documenting any further bait." She paused, then offered a building supervisor's line. I saved it and thanked her. Doors close faster when someone inside hears you. By late afternoon, the smear slideshow mutated into a live stream teaser. A countdown wheel ticked toward 7. "They plan to broadcast tonight and tag my employer," he whispered. I looked up and felt a cold resolve climb my spine. "We go proactive," I said and laid out tasks. He drafted an email to his manager with a clear summary and links. I prepared a packet with the police incident number, the bank reversal, and our therapist's note. We pressed send together and watched the outbox clear. His manager replied in 12 minutes flat. "We appreciate the transparency," the email read. "If contacted, HR will route to legal." He stared at the screen like it threw him a rope. I exhaled and finally felt traction. At 6, the doorbell rang twice in a pattern. I checked the peephole and recognized the stranger from the market. He held up his phone like a badge. "1 minute on neutral ground," he called through the door. I swallowed once and shook my head. Any message can arrive by email, I answered loud and firm. He sneered for the camera he pretended not to hold. You hide behind paperwork because you fear truth. He leaned closer until his breath fogged the glass. I hit record from my side and let him talk. Neighbors stepped into the hallway and stared. The stranger clocked the witnesses and retreated 2 steps. Last chance for him to return without penalty. He tossed a business card under the door and walked off. Printed on it was one word: tribunal. I picked up the card and turned it over. A meeting link waited beside tonight's hour. They want a staged confession, I said and pocketed it. He looked sick, then furious, then steady again. Let's watch and document, he said through his teeth. I shook my head. We will participate for 5 seconds only. He frowned in confusion until I explained. We enter, we state no consent to record, we serve notice and leave. He stared at me and then nodded once. Short, controlled, undeniable. His shoulders settled into a new line. Fear gave way to action. That shift was the start of something I could trust. At 7:55, we clicked the meeting link from an empty room. Cameras turned on across a grid of faces. A host launched into a rehearsed welcome and called him brother. I raised my hand and leaned into the frame. This session has no consent from either of us, I stated slowly. Any recording will be used as evidence of harassment. The host tried to interrupt with a smooth smile. I lifted a printed notice to the lens and held it. Here are the case numbers, I continued without pause. Here are the reverse transactions aligned with your shell vendors. Chat exploded with attempts to mute me. I spoke over the crosstalk and finished the message. Any contact must go through counsel. I ended the call before they reacted. His hands shook and then went still. We stared at the blank screen and listened for a knock. Nothing came. For a moment, silence felt like a win. It didn't last long. A new account tagged our profiles with a clipped video. The caption accused us of bullying a healing community. I opened the clip and saw my own face mid-sentence. They had recorded anyway and cut out key lines. File another takedown, I said and began typing. He drafted a response and then deleted it. We stick to the pack. Ket, he reminded himself out loud. He was learning the rhythm of restraint. The countdown to their live stream flipped to 8:30. We tuned in from a dummy profile and watched them stall. The host spoke in riddles and vague warnings. The audience begged for names and fuel. I recognized desperation behind the swagger. He whispered without looking away, "If they lay about my work, I sue." I nodded and kept collecting timestamps. Finally, they played a distorted voicemail and claimed it was mine. It was. The accent and cadence were off by miles. I paused the stream and clipped the audio. Then I sent it to a friend who analyzes voice patterns. "Rush read please," I wrote with a dry mouth. She answered with a thumbs up and a promise to check fast. While we waited, the host dropped the rental office address. He urged viewers to write letters demanding firmer policies for spouses who interfere. I forwarded that segment to the supervisor from earlier. She responded with 3 words: "We are prepared." My friend texted back with a waveform and a note. "Not you, synthetic blend, fragments from your past videos." She attached a short explanation that even a jury could follow. I felt heat fly to my cheeks and then cool to focus. "We announced the fraud," I said and drafted a single paragraph. He shared it from his account with the waveform attached. We pinned the post and disabled comments. The goal now was clarity, not debate. 9:30 arrived with a final volley from their grid. "Open hearing tomorrow," the host proclaimed. "We will expose the parasite behind the scenes." My laugh came out low and humorless. They were trying to drag this into a spectacle and trap our weekend. I opened a new message to our therapist. "Emergency session at noon if available." Within minutes she offered 12:15. I confirmed and then shut my laptop. Enough screens, enough noise. He leaned back and stared at the ceiling. I almost missed simple arguments about chores. I let a tiny smile escape and then vanish. "We are not going back to small lies." He nodded and pressed 2 fingers to his heart. Near midnight, an email from the podcast consultant landed. A cease and desist draft with shaky legal bones. It demanded we retract mischaracterizations and attend a mediated circle. I forwarded it to counsel with a single line. "Counter letter with teeth, please." I turned to him and spoke quietly. "Tomorrow we bring one more step, a notarized statement of financial separation for 3 months." He frowned, then understood the shield I was building. "You will have autonomy without secret drains," I added. He agreed without flinch. We powered down every device except one. An old tablet logged in on a throwaway account. If they launched midnight surprises, we would still hear. I finally let my shoulders drop for 10 seconds. 10 seconds was enough to reset. A final ping arrived as I closed my eyes. Not a threat, a message from an unexpected source. The neighbor across the hall had copied a text from the stranger. It named a 5th alias tied to the same mailbox. The trail widened into something we could follow. I sat up and wrote the alias on our board. Then I drew a line to the reverse charges in the welfare call time. The map formed a pattern with clean angles. Patterns become leverage when you stand your ground. He came to my side and traced the same lines. I will testify to every step, he whispered, steady now. He looked different in that moment, older and truer. I believed him because action had replaced apology. We climbed into bed without speaking more. The tablet hummed in the other room like a distant guard. I closed my eyes and rehearsed tomorrow's plan once, then again, then once more until sleep finally negotiated a truce. I woke to the tablet buzzing like a trapped hornet. A new alias posted our address and a countdown. I sat up and grabbed my notebook. Today would not drift, today would move. I shook his shoulder and pointed at the screen. His eyes cleared fast and focused. We go to the emergency session, I said. He swung his legs over the edge and nodded once. The shower ran and stopped in minutes. We dressed without chatter and packed the folder. At the door I pressed a palm to his chest. No improvising today, I warned, tight and calm. We reached the office early and checked in. The therapist waved us inside ahead of schedule. Give me the last 12 hours, she requested. I opened the folder and set out the proof. She read, then looked at him first. What are you willing to do by sunset? He drew a breath like a swimmer and held it. Public apology to guests, written renunciation, full financial access, he answered in sequence. Add one more, I said and kept my tone even. A notarized affidavit for separate finances for 3 months. He flinched and then steadied. I agree if it keeps you safe. Make every step visible, the therapist added. Visibility protects you from revision. We both nodded. She was right. Secrets are the fertilizer here. I opened a group message with last night's attendees. Expect a follow-up note before noon, I typed. He watched me type and swallowed. Accountability is heavier when witnesses read every comma. She turned to me and asked for my line. What do you refuse today if he hesitates? I didn't soften. I file for a protective order and initiate division, I said, crisp and final. He closed his eyes for a second. I won't hesitate, his hands unclenched on his knees. The room felt like a station where trains depart on time. Next, the broadcast, she continued. Do not engage live, capture and escalate. I held up the phone and showed the timer, 2 hours left until they went on air again. We passed the notary on the way out. The desk clerk raised an eyebrow at the form. He signed first and handed me the pen. I signed and pressed the stamp hard until the ink bit. Outside, my lawyer friend called with a draft, a cease and desist that actually had teeth. Service can happen by email with receipt, she explained. Also prepare a harassment complaint. I saved both and felt my shoulders drop a notch. At noon, we recorded a 2-minute video together. No flourishes, no bait. We are separating finances and pursuing action, he stated. I added one line about doxing being a crime. We posted across our channels and disabled replies. Screenshots went to the incident folder and the HR contact. The trail was clean and dated. When people change their stories, dates do not. His manager pinged a quick note of support. Security flagged your names for any inquiries. He exhaled and set the phone down flat. A small victory still counts. We ate fast and unceremonious, not for comfort, for fuel. At exactly 12:15, the therapist texted a reminder. Drink water, keep phones low, short messages only. While we reorganized, a new email arrived. Open hearing moved to a public park, the message announced. Clever, I thought. Public space invites chaos and cameras. We would not go there. I called the local precinct and reported planned harassment, gave time, location, context, and names. We will have a cruiser nearby, came the answer. I thanked them and logged the call. He checked our bank app again and frowned. A microcharge attempted to sneak through from a fresh shell. I hit decline and added it to the chart. The pattern sharpened like a printed map. We set up a shared drive with read-only links. Guests, HR, neighbors, the therapist, and counsel got access. No one would rely on rumors now. Rumors starve in daylight. At 2, the first burner text hit his phone. It offered amnesty if he recanted tonight. I typed back from the tablet. All communication must go through counsel and attach the letterhead. The line went silent for 6 minutes, then 5 more numbers tried again. I set an auto-reply on his device that used the same sentence. He watched as each new message received the same wall. Automation can be a boundary when your hands get tired. We drove to the station and filed a formal complaint. The officer listened and noted every alias. If they show up at your home again, call right away. I nodded and stored the card in a safe pocket. Outside, a car rolled slow along the curb. A man in the passenger seat lifted a phone. I lifted mine, too. He lowered his camera first and the car rolled on. At 3, we met the notary again for a second document, a statement that neither of us consented to recordings of private counseling. The stamp hit paper with another hard sound. Repetition became armor. We took a breath and headed to the branch to finalize the freeze. The manager escorted us to a small desk. Your alerts are now human-reviewed before release, she assured. I thanked her and left with the case number in my hand. Back home, I drafted a message to the neighbors. If anyone approaches you about us, do not engage. I included the officer's card in the counselor note, the thread lit with supportive replies and doorbell camera offers. I saved the offers and kept moving. 4:30 arrived with a new tactic from them, a fake charity drive in his name. I recognized the host's cadence in the description. Report for fraud, I wrote and sent the link to the platform. The page vanished 20 minutes later. He rubbed his temples and stared at the rug. My chest feels tight. I put his hand on my shoulder and held it. We are not alone in this, I said, steady and clear. The live stream countdown ticked closer to 5. We set the tablet on a stand and opened a fresh document. Every minute would be logged with time stamps and brief notes. A witness needs clean ink. As the stream started, the host tried humor. Then he pivoted to menace when viewers dropped. He flashed half-truths and jumped cuts. My pen moved fast. His jaw clenched and then unlocked. Halfway through, the screen flashed a montage of his photos. Captions called me a saboteur and a parasite's mirror. I wrote defamation segment 522 and drew an arrow. He whispered, I want to sue now, without looking away. I squeezed his forearm once. We billed first, we hit once. He nodded and kept watching. The host promised a surprise at the end and dragged on. The surprise was a recorded call with a distorted voice. They claimed it was me begging him to cut friends. I paused and replayed the background noise twice. A muffled train bell we never hear near our home. I clipped the audio and sent it to my friend again. Listen for splices, I wrote with my teeth tight. Within 10 minutes she returned a text. Multiple edits, borrowed words, machine harmonics on vowels. We forwarded that result to counsel along with the timestamp. The letter went out before the stream ended. Cease or face litigation, it read with delightful brevity. I felt the first true crack on their side. At 6, the host's smile faltered on camera. Ahmad whispered off screen and yanked the segment. They replaced it with generic filler in Q and A. The numbers dropped like pebbles off a ledge. My phone buzzed with the building supervisor's message. We intercepted flyers targeting other tenants. She attached a picture of the bin. All turned over to the front desk, she wrote. I thanked her and added the image to the file. We took a short lap through the hallway to reset. He checked the stairwell and paused. I lived in my head for months, he confessed. Today I live in the file. I smiled because I understood. Back inside, we prepared one more move. A community post with hard boundaries and a calm stance. He recorded it in one take. My turn next. I will keep hosting small, respectful dinners, I said. Anyone who disrupts will be removed with help. We pressed publish and silenced our devices for 10 minutes. The room felt like it remembered what normal was. Then a loud buzz from the tablet snapped us back. The group announced the public park event again. They encouraged locals to witness the unmasking at 8. I checked the calendar and traced our options. We would not go. We would send a message to the precinct and the park staff. I called the park office and flagged the plan. The clerk took notes and promised a ranger presence. No amplified sound without a permit, she added. That would matter soon. At 7:30, my lawyer friend texted a draft restraining request. Ready to file if they approach again, she wrote. Include tonight's location. I copied her lines and prepared the packet on my desktop. He paced the room twice, then forced himself to sit. Tell me your line in the sand, he asked, voice steady. You already know it, I answered without blinking. Lies in public or secret cash in private. He nodded like it fit his bones. We tuned the tablet to the park's live feed from a bystander. The host stood on a bench and tried to shout. A ranger approached and pointed to a sign. The host waved him off and raised his voice. Another ranger arrived with a calm expression. We watched the exchange shift from bravado to rules. The crowd thinned when the ranger held up a citation pad. The host pivoted to a sermon about repression. The wind ate half his lines and the rest landed dull. Then he used our names and promised a confrontation at our door. My lungs filled with ice and then heat. I hit dial on the precinct card. They intend to approach again, I reported. The dispatcher logged and dispatched. 10 minutes later, a patrol car rolled past our building. I texted the neighbor thread, keep doors shut if they knock. Responses poured in with confirmations and little blue hearts. Community can be a fortress when fear taps the glass. 8:22, footsteps approached in a cluster. I felt the old wave of dread and let it pass. He looked at me and waited for instruction. Record, do not speak first, I said, crisp and low. The first knock came with a performative rhythm. I checked the peephole and counted 4 faces. 2 I knew, 2 new. The tallest raised his phone to the door and announced a final appeal. I began recording and did not breathe. This residence has no consent for filming, I stated through the door. Leave now, police are en route. The tallest smirked and pressed a printed letter to the glass. He tried the knob and found the lock. He tried again for the camera. She isolates him from masculine strength, he declared. My hand shook, but the camera stayed steady. Sirens cut the scene before it grew teeth. The men glanced toward the stairwell and froze. The tallest lowered his voice and tried to recast the moment. Too late, the hallway filled with uniforms. Officers separated the visitors from the door. A ranger from the park arrived with a second citation. No permit, no compliance, move along, he recited without drama. The tallest argued and lost ground. We stepped back from the peephole and waited. The knock returned, different now. A firm officer voice requested identification and statements. I opened the door with the chai in on and showed my phone. Recordings of your approach, I said, holding the screen. Prior threats, past doxing, active case number. The officer nodded and took notes. The tallest swallowed and stared at the floor. Do you want to press charges? The officer asked. I looked at him, then at the men. Yes, I answered with a throat that did not shake, for harassment and trespass. The word trespass felt like a key turning. The officers escorted them downstairs and out. One lingered to collect our statements in full. You did the right preparation, she noted. It makes our job simple. I thanked her and closed the door once she left. We sank onto the couch and did not speak. The tablet buzzed with the group's last gasp, a message claiming police persecution and biased neighbors. I took a screenshot and filed it like the rest. He pulled the divorce folder from the shelf. For a second I stopped breathing. He opened it slowly and removed the papers. Then he folded them in half and handed them to me. Not like this, he said, voice grounded. I was running from shame and noise. I held the papers and felt their lightness. They did not matter anymore unless we gave them weight. Words only mean anything with follow-through, I answered. He nodded and stood. Then he walked to the desk and opened his laptop. I'm sending final refunds to anyone I brought into that circle, he said without flinch. I watched the transfers land, small amounts, crisp notes, a line that said closure. He then blocked the last remaining alias and held up the screen. No more channels, he confirmed. I wrote a final line in the shared document. Resolved contact attempts tonight with police intervention. Then I added one personal line. We chose boundaries and each other under pressure. He looked at me and lifted 2 fingers to his heart. I mirrored the gesture and felt my own heartbeat slow. The room felt lived in again, not staged for war. I walked to the kitchen and filled 2 glasses. Water, not celebration. I handed him one and touched rims. We drank like athletes after a long match. Then I went to the shredder and held the folded papers. He stood beside me without touching my arm. I fed the first half to the blades and watched lines disappear. The second half hovered at my fingertips. Last chance to change course, I said softly. He shook his head and reached for my free hand. I already did, he answered, steady as a drum. I slid the rest into the teeth and listened. The machine chewed through signatures and threats. Confetti fell into a bin we would empty tomorrow. Tonight it stayed. We powered down the tablet and set the phones face down. I opened the window an inch to let the room breathe. He leaned against the frame and looked at me. No speech, no performance, just a man choosing. A car rolled by outside and faded. The building settled and the pipes clicked once. My shoulders dropped without asking permission. My voice found a normal volume again. Tomorrow we keep dinner small, I said. No announcements, no crusades, just people and simple food. He smiled with his eyes and nodded. I placed the officer's card on the table and left it there, not as a threat, as a boundary we could point to, the same way you set a fence so the garden can grow. We turned off the last light and stood in the doorway a moment. The hallway was empty and quiet, no notes, no watchers, just a key turning in a lock that worked. I lay down and stared at the ceiling until my heartbeat evened. He joined me and stayed on his side for space. Are we good? He asked in a whisper that did not beg. I breathed in and let myself answer honestly. We are in motion, I said, clear and warm. Keep it moving tomorrow and the next day after that. He nodded against the pillow and exhaled. Promise is not a sound, promise is a consistent step. A final buzz vibrated in the other room and stopped. The auto reply had done its job again. We let it sit. We did not rush to read. I closed my eyes and held one picture in my mind. Not their faces, not their threats, just our table with 2 glasses waiting, and the slice of paper in the bin quiet and finished.